Hello and welcome. You're about to watch the Concept Index presentation from the Wellbeing Education Resilience Programme. We'd like to draw your attention to the Face COVID video. The link is here. If you haven't already watched it, we suggest that you give yourself 5 minutes to do so at some point. It gives a great overview of how to support wellbeing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can click on the link below when the PowerPoint presentation is in slideshow mode.
This is the first video in the watch element of the WER programme, the Concept Index. Topics covered in more detail in this video are indicated with a blue star in the other webinars. Should you want any further information or have any questions on anything covered in this webinar, you can book onto one of our Q&A conferences.
Here you can see the following concepts in this version of the Concept Index. They're listed here, and if you click on the Run in Person buttons, these will take you directly to the presentation for that section. And at the end of that section, you'll see a little house button. If you click on the house button, that will bring you straight back to this home page here so that you can have a look at the other sections. It's just a way of helping you to navigate through the presentation, so that maybe that you're looking in the Concept Index to check out one particular aspect that's been spoken about in another presentation, and this allows you to be able to find it hopefully easily.
So when we're talking about well-being, we are thinking of a person's mental, emotional and physical health and how well they are in terms of each of those. If we think of our mental health as being on a spectrum, you have two total opposite sides. If we're looking at the side on our left, looking at a person with good mental health and positive state of well-being, this is a person who is able to realise his or her own potential, a person who can cope with the normal stresses of daily life, they can work productively and fruitfully, and they're able to make a contribution to their community. So it's somebody who's really able to be happy most of the time, who's able to be resilient and bounce back from adversity, and really able to push their boundaries and take themselves out of their comfort zone. So then if we're looking at the total opposite end of the spectrum towards this red end on the right, we're thinking of somebody with very poor mental health and a very negative state of well-being. It could be that they have a mental health condition. In this situation, their mental health is likely to affect their thinking, their emotions and their behaviour, and it's likely to disrupt their ability to carry out their daily activities and engage in satisfying personal relationships. So this person in this end of the spectrum is likely to really be struggling to hold on to their relationships and really not be able to carry out their normal everyday tasks. So now we're going to look at the fact that it is a spectrum, and we all fall along this spectrum somewhere or another throughout our lives. It could be that we're more often down one end of the spectrum. It could be that we travel along it throughout the day. It could be that we stay on one side quite often, and then we may travel along it through periods of struggle, through periods that we find hard. And this is to do with risk factors and protective factors. They are explained further on in this video. There is a further explanation of those. So, for example, we may wake up one morning and we're in a really good mood, and then we get to work and several things have happened. There's been traffic and it's made us late. We've been told off by a member of our leadership, or maybe there's been a student who's really pressed some of our buttons. And that's really going to push us down to the poor mental health side. We may now be really stressed, very impatient, we could be very upset, and that's really going to move us towards that right end of the spectrum. It might not push us all the way, it might push us just a bit further on than we would normally be. But then someone might make us feel much better. We may talk to someone, it makes us feel more positive about the situation. That the student might come up to us and apologise for what they've done, and it may be that actually it's a good thing that we turned up late because we may have avoided an accident. I don't know. So those things have happened and they've made us feel a bit better. Or it could be that actually we've purposely done things that make us feel better. We may have done breathing techniques, we may have done a bit of exercise, etc. So then we move again further along to the positive side of the mental health spectrum. So again, we can move along this as far as our mental health allows us to go. It depends on what risk factors we're experiencing. It depends on what positive protective factors we're experiencing as to how far we might move along it. It also depends on how resilient we are as to how far along it we allow ourselves to travel. So somebody who is very much stuck on this extreme end of the mental health spectrum side, this red side on the right, if they're stuck there for longer than 2 weeks, that's when it may be they need to seek further support in terms of their mental health. It may be that they are struggling with a mental health condition, depression, anxiety, etc. If they're just there for a day or a couple of days, it may just be that they're experiencing a period of low mood, and actually they will be able to get them out of it eventually. But yeah, it's if someone's there for longer than 2 weeks, that's when you need to be looking at your options in terms of maybe providing extra support for them, encouraging them to seek support, etc. When thinking about well-being and resilience and trying to ensure that somebody is able to maintain positive well-being and become more resilient, we talk about tipping the balance. This is trying to ensure that a person has more protective factors than they do risk factors. Everybody will experience risk factors in their life. We can't protect them from those. Risk factors and experiencing risk factors are actually what will make someone resilient. They have to experience them and overcome them in order to learn how to do that. But what will make it easier for them to do that is to make sure they have more protective factors than risk factors. The next couple of slides are going to explain what risk factors are and what protective factors are and give some examples of those. So risk factors are things, events, people, etc. that are more likely to hinder our emotional development or to make us feel negative emotions, or they could be negative experiences that influence our future emotions and memories, etc. So these are things that mean we are more likely to experience poor mental health, poor well-being, and a lesser emotional development. So this is more likely to happen if our risk factors outweigh our protective factors. As I've said before, we do need some risk factors in our life in order to be resilient and able to learn how to overcome them. So some of these risk factors might be we have traumatic events, poverty, family, mental health, family conflict, physical, mental disabilities, domestic abuse, bullying, social media, unemployment, and substance misuse. So these are some of our more common risk factors are likely to have more of a detrimental effect on our emotional development, on our mental health, and things are more likely to cause emotions such as stress, anxiety, etc. So these aren't the only risk factors. Like I say, they're just some of our more common ones, some of the ones you're more likely to hear of. But yeah, a risk factor is, like I say, anything that is more likely to push us towards that red side of the spectrum, mental health spectrum, pushing us towards that poor mental health. So now we're going to look at protective factors. These are things that are protecting our well-being and our positive mental health and protecting our happiness. So they are things that are doing basically the opposite to what our risk factors are doing. They are likely to promote positive well-being. They are going to promote resilience. They're going to make situations easier for us to overcome. And they are just generally going to protect us. They are things such as physical exercise. Like we've said, this physical exercise is so good for our mental health and our well-being. It produces so many feel-good hormones, etc. Secure and early relationships. So this is really important when we're thinking about attachment and trust and our ability to form relationships. If we can secure early relationships, it really, really helps our emotional development. A secure attachment, healthy diet, sleep, supportive social networks, hobbies and interests, adequate housing, routine, clear boundaries, affection, and humour. So again, these are our more common protective factors. They are probably some of the most effective protective factors. They are all things that are going to, as I say, encourage our emotional development, improve our well-being, and promote happiness. And it's really important that we are ensuring that we have more of these in our lives than we do risk factors. We can't avoid risk factors, that we are always going to experience risk factors. But in order to keep us on the green, left, happy side of our mental health spectrum, we need to make sure we are inputting and implementing more of these in our lives than we are risk factors. So several things that we can do to look after our well-being. The main thing that I want to talk to you about today are the 5 ways to well-being. So these can either be preventative, so you may actually be in quite a good place in terms of your mental health and your well-being. You may be fit and healthy and happy, but it's still really important to do these things to keep you feeling that way. Or it could be that you're down the right end of the spectrum and actually you are struggling a bit and you really need to boost your happiness and your well-being and your health. And in which case, again, these are really good to pull you along to that left green side of the spectrum. So the 5 ways to well-being are: be active, take notice, connect, give, and keep learning. So you'll probably hear a lot about these throughout your journey in terms of creating a whole school approach, or just a lot at the moment, especially in the current climate, when there is such an emphasis on keeping yourself well and healthy mentally and emotionally, because they're so effective. So be active is about keeping moving, keeping your body active, and keeping up physical activity. There's lots of reasons for this. It releases lots of good hormones, positive, feel-good hormones. It burns off a lot of adrenaline that's built up in anxiety. There's lots of reasons for being active, contributing to you feeling much better and feeling good. Take notice. So this is about being in the present moment and really taking stock of how you are internally, how your thoughts are, how your emotions are, and as well paying attention to your external surroundings as well. So a lot of mindfulness, meditation, grounding techniques, those sorts of things will really come under this section. The reason this helps is because it really gives you the time and the space to reflect on how you are and gives you the time to think about, if you're not feeling great, what do you need to do to make yourself feel better? And if you are feeling great, it emphasizes the fact that you are, and it helps you acknowledge that. Connect. This is about connecting with those around you. Obviously, at the moment, that's much harder. This is probably the one of the 5 ways to well-being that's been affected the most at the moment. That's become much harder to do because we're just not able to connect with people as well as we could. Obviously, virtually is nowhere near as effective as face to face. But the more you can connect with others, the more you can talk to others, the better. Things like trading text messages for phone calls or virtual conversations, etc. If you do feel that you are struggling one day, picking up the phone and just talking to someone can really help. So it's really important that you're connecting with other people as well. This is about giving your time, your words, your presence. So it doesn't just mean doing that for other people, it also means doing this for yourself. So this could be giving somebody your time in terms of giving them advice and just being there for them when they need you, or it could be giving yourself time. So it could be, for example, just give yourself time to do something that you really enjoy, having that little bit of me time. So last but not least, we have keep learning. This is about really enriching your mind. This is about learning something new or relearning something that you used to do, new skills. It could be things that help you gain confidence and competence. It could be just pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and really growing and having that growth as a person. This is about the joy of achieving. Once you learn something new, there's so much joy in it, being able to achieve that. And as well, it's just really good to keep your brain healthy and working and active. So in the staff wellbeing webinar, there are lots of examples of ways you can do each of these during lockdown.
William Glasser was an American psychiatrist, and he presented these ideas around our basic human needs. He said that we were all born with these 5 inherent needs, and that our behaviour is always a way of us trying and attempting to get these needs met. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, you'll see some similarities because they both speak about the same aspects, apart from the fact that Maslow's hierarchy is hierarchical, that you have to meet your basic needs before you can move on to meet your other needs in life. Whereas William Glasser doesn't have a sense of hierarchy. He talks about us meeting all of these basic 5 needs concurrently, and at different times we might be focusing on different needs, but generally we're all looking at all of them. And here are his 5 needs. So survival is the main need that we have. It's our need to survive and to live. And actually it's the most important one, in the sense that if we don't meet that need and therefore we don't survive, then meeting the other needs is kind of irrelevant. So we really do need to think about our survival need. The other needs we have, so survival is around our basic needs for protection, for safety, for a roof over our heads, to be clothed and fed, to be warm, to be nurtured. So all of these things about things that we need to keep our bodies well and our bodies working and living and maintaining ourselves. Love and belonging is the need for affection, for feeling like you are valued, that you're thought about, that you have connections with other people, that you're valued, that you have affection shown to you and you have others that you can show affection to, that you are respected and that you're able to respect other people. So all of these things around connections and feeling like you're wanted, that you belong to something, is incredibly important and can drive our behaviour in many ways. The need for power is really interesting, because when we think about a need for power, often people misinterpret it and think it's a need for seeking power, like power and control, or seeking to be in charge. But that really isn't how William Glasser saw it, and that actually relates more to more of our autonomy, I guess, which we talk about in another one of the needs. But the idea about power is really, really relevant to educationalists, people who work in schools, teaching children and working with children and people. He explains that the more knowledge that we have and the more skills that we have, the more powerful we are. So he says the more things that you know and the more things that you can do, makes you very powerful, because it means you can do anything you want in life. So, if you have the ability to learn, and you're able to get feedback and feel successful, have a sense of achievement, have a sense of like a thirst for knowledge, be keen to learn. All of these elements are around this need for power. And the more powerful that we are in life, the more ability we have to assert ourselves comes from the knowledge and skill set that we have. So knowledge and skills are really key and important. And these then feed into our sense of achievement, our sense of the fact that we can be successful, the fact that we can learn, the fact that we can grow, we can develop. And if we don't know something now, that's okay, because we have the opportunity to learn things in the future, which is really, really important for our well-being, to have a sense of that within ourselves. The need for fun is often very overlooked, particularly in adults, but sometimes within education too. The need to have fun is a basic human need. We need to feel joy. We need to have things that make us laugh, to smile, things that give us pleasure, things that we enjoy doing, our hobbies, just the ability of things to get us moving around, of working our brain, of connecting with other people. All of these things we do at the same time as having fun. So it's really important for our energy levels. The therapeutic cost of benefits of laughing and reminiscing, of doing fun things that we enjoy and love, is really, really key. And it's really, really important at a time when we feel like we don't have time for fun. That's one of the times where we really need to think, actually, we do need to give ourselves time for finding pleasure, even if it's something very quick and very simple, but actually thinking about, what does give me joy, what does spark my enthusiasm for life, what gives me zest, what gives me motivation to do things that I enjoy doing. It's really, really important. And the idea of freedom of a basic need is linked to our autonomy. So we can think about freedom from and freedom to. So we have needs to be free from fear, free from worry, free from threat, and be free to make our own choices, to make our own decisions, to weigh up the pros and cons of things, to decide to do things, to behave in certain ways, and to accept the consequences of those actions that we do, to take responsibility for the choices that we make. That's all part of our freedom. To be free to do as we please and be reckless with that isn't a good way of fulfilling that need, because that will lead to further difficulties. So the ability for freedom is to feel, liberated, but also to have a social awareness of how we operate our freedom in a responsible way, is part of fulfilling that need in a helpful way that benefits us. William Glasser also talks about that if we wake up one morning and we're not feeling okay within ourselves, that our well-being doesn't feel so good, he thinks that we should look towards our basic 5 needs and how we are getting those needs met, because his work has indicated that feeling unhappy or feeling discontent or not feeling okay within ourselves is linked to having some kind of gap or unfulfillment of these 5 needs. And he also suggests that we look at our relationships that we have with other people, because we get our needs met through our current relationships that we have in our life. So our social interactions are absolutely key in order for us to fulfill our needs. And the reason that we need to fulfill our needs is to feel okay. Now, we often use various analogies when we're thinking about our 5 basic human needs. So in this concept index presentation, we're using the idea of vases of liquids. You can also use the idea in the presentations, we often use coffee cups. With young people, students, children, you could use fizzy drink bottles or some other kind of vessel or pot. But you can use all sorts of analogies to think about having these needs met. And if we have our needs met to a very kind of evenly balanced way, we don't have to have our pots, our vases or our coffee cups full to the top and brimming. If you do, that might be an indication that you're someone who's maybe quite high maintenance and you need a lot of your needs in each area to feel okay. So you're somebody who may be very sociable and need that love and belonging, need to have lots of groups of friends, like to interact socially, lots of different people. You may have a real thirst for knowledge and like to do lots of learning and growing your sense of power and your knowledge and your skills. You may be somebody who's constantly, having fun, enjoying yourself. Life is full of hobbies and activity and busyness. So if you're you're somebody in life that likes to have a lot, then your pots will be fuller, your vases will be fuller. And as long as they're evenly balanced, then you'll feel kind of reasonably okay with your well-being and your mental health. If you are somebody who needs less in your life, so lower maintenance perhaps, then your coffee cups or your flower vases will have less liquid in them. But again, it doesn't matter how much liquid you have. That's all down to individual personality and your individual needs. What's important is about whether they're balanced or not. If you have one pot that's incredibly full and another vase which is, running on dry, running on empty, this is where we start behaving in ways to try and get our needs met. And quite often we can behave in ways that maybe are unhelpful for us. Or we might try and fill up the wrong pot because we think we want to fill up this pot and we need this vase fuller. Actually, it's a different vase that's running on empty. We don't really recognise that because we don't talk explicitly enough about these basic human needs with each other and reflect on them ourselves. So we don't often consciously know which need we might be lacking in or which relationships in our life is helping us to fulfil these relationships in a better way than maybe others do. It's helpful for us to relate what we're talking about when we're thinking about needs and well-being to the kinds of behaviours that we see in schools. And a needs-led behaviours framework is helpful to do this. So in this framework, we start at the top with the underlying needs that a child or young person has. And we've covered those around survival, love and belonging, power, freedom and fun, our flower vases or our cups. And generally, the majority of children, young people will have their needs met through good quality relationships that they have with people around them. So this will lead to positive outcomes. They'll get their needs met, they'll have good interactions with other people, and this will reinforce positive attachment experiences. So they'll be developing views about themselves, that they're a good person and they're responded to well, and that they're listened to, that they know that the world is roughly a safe place to live in because adults are trustworthy, adults are there to help them. If they're stuck with something, they can ask. So there's lots of great things that come from these needs being met in a positive way. Now, for some children, young people, their needs might not be met through the relationships that they have in their everyday lives. And so their task is to find alternative ways to get these needs met. And they will behave in ways to try to get these needs met, okay? Now, it'll go one of two ways. It may be that they find appropriate alternative ways of behaving that's approved by adults and their peers and generally society around us, and that these will also lead to positive outcome. So, for instance, a young person might not have their needs being met currently within their current relationships, but they may seek other relationships like a family friend or a neighbour or a club leader or maybe a key adult in school. They'll develop other things that they can do and other relationships that they will develop in order to interact with those people and behave in ways that will get their needs met positively. Now, what happens with some young people and children that we see in schools is that they begin to behave in inappropriate ways. They seek inappropriate alternatives to get their needs met. So we might see aggressive behaviour, sexual harmful behaviour. We might see children who are withdrawing, or young people, children who are really attention needing. So needing to have lots of adult time and thought and thinking and being held in mind a lot. You might see other risk-taking problem behaviours or self-harming behaviours, and these can all lead to negative outcomes. So we have, difficulties with behaviour that people are trying to manage and respond to, and we have lots of dysregulation emotionally that people need to help and assist with regulation. There are frustrations going on within relationships with people and negative attachment experiences. So the young person will be developing ideas about the world, that the world isn't a great place to be in and that you can't trust people, and that actually, they feel like people aren't there for them. So this kind of starts to lead to some negative thinking and behaviour. And you can see the red arrow takes you right back up to the top, because if someone's acting in ways which is pushing people and themselves away from each other rather than connecting themselves with other people, they're actually pushing people further away, they're less likely to get their basic needs met. And if they're less likely to get their basic needs met in life, then they're going to have to seek alternative ways. And the chances are, if they've already started seeking inappropriate alternative ways, that becomes their kind of default. And if we, so this becomes like a loop in a way. So we got the loop that goes from the negative outcomes up to not getting their needs met, behaving inappropriately, negative outcome, don't get their needs met, and that loop continues round and they get kind of stuck in this cycle. And if we just, as education staff, focus on that inappropriate behaviour and we put in strategies that just tweak or divert that actual behaviour, what tends to happen is their needs still maybe not be getting met, but a different inappropriate alternative behaviour crops up. So you may have a child who, for instance, has an issue with swearing. Now you may work on that and teach them a more appropriate language. And you think, great, that's helpful, that's sorted that. But then suddenly the children begin spitting or kicking or doing some other kind of behaviour, which is an inappropriate way of trying to get their needs met. So we need to really think. There still are obviously things that one would do to minimise and to try and divert from those actual behaviours. Not saying we don't deal with that. We still respond to the behaviour, but we also should be thinking about those underlying needs and actually trying to get children off of that loop and under a different alternative. So we want to try and get them to move away from this cycle up here, and we want to try and get them down on a different trajectory where we can get them to, when they're not getting their needs met, that we get them met and they come down this way. So they come down here. So we want them to be able to have this opportunity to come this way rather than being stuck in their loop where they're just going round and round in circles from here. So they're just going round and round in circles down this way. So they're getting stuck here. And what we want them to do is to come off and get themselves down that green line to more appropriate behaviours that will help them to develop their relationships and to become more connected with people around them, in more hope that their needs will become met and therefore they will be better in their well-being and their behaviour as well. So we've just been talking about the needs-led behaviour framework and how children and young people can get stuck on that loop of not having their needs met, therefore behaving in inappropriate alternative ways and not getting our needs met again, and that kind of loop. And it's something within us that, whether we realise it or not, the way in which we're acting or behaving is driven by this need to get our basic needs met, whether we're aware of that or not. So something that can be really helpful is to raise awareness with children and young people about these 5 needs and teach them what each of the needs mean, teach them about how their relationships are important in terms of helping them get their needs met. And we can help the young people to reflect on this. And this is just one example of a framework which you could use with children and young people to, after having done some work with them explaining what each of the 5 needs are, this kind of framework can help them to reflect on, well, how do I get each of these needs met? And in particular, who is it in my life that helps me to get these needs met? And it can be really interesting when you're talking with children and people about different people that they recognise that give them different things. And it can be fascinating as an adult working with a child, young person, when you sometimes don't often realise the people who are important to us. So they can have a look and think about, who is it who enables me to survive? How do I get a roof over my head? Who helps me to feel safe? Who helps to, feed me and to keep my body working well? Who is it who enables me to seek medical help when I need to? So things like that, thinking about who is it that helps them to get these needs met? Who is it who I have fun with? Who helps me to do that? How do I get these needs met through the relationships and friendships that I have? And then you can go one step further, so you can think about, well, are there any barriers that stop me from getting my needs met? And are there any possible relationships that might not be working so well at the moment that actually are getting in the way of me getting some of these needs met? And what do I think about these difficulties? And then you can think about ideas of like, well, how else could I get these needs met? And if there's a particular need that comes up that actually the child or young person thinks that they're struggling with when they're reflecting, then it's helping them to start thinking about what alternative appropriate ways are there of acting and behaving that might help me to form better or stronger or strengthen the relationships that I have with other people that will help me to get this need met. So it's always connecting their understanding of themselves and their needs with the relationships and interactions that they have with other people in their lives, and thinking about what they can do to strengthen the things that are working well even further, and any other ideas they might have for new things they might want to try or new strategies that they might want to put into place. If you want to simplify, you can just remove the middle one and just talk about how am I getting these needs met, reflecting on what's working well, and then things that I can do even further to help me. But if you want to go that one step further, you can also add in the barriers there. And you can also do this as a whole class or whole group in groups, where you can talk about, well, as a class, how does the class being in this class, how does being in this class or belonging to this school help me get these needs met? You can do that as a staff team too, thinking about, well, actually, being an employee here, how does being a staff member in this school help me to get my basic human needs met? And are there any barriers to working here that kind of interfere with me getting my basic needs met? And what impact does that have on me? And how do I feel about that? A bit later on, we talk about the WEDEP approach. And the WEDEP is another way of helping children, young people and adults to reflect on the ways in which they're behaving and to link it to their basic needs. So the WEDEP is thinking about, what is it that I'm doing? So that's the what, the W and the D. What is it that I'm doing? How am I behaving? And is what I'm doing, what is it that I need? And what am I seeking? And is what I'm doing helping me to get there? And then the E is evaluating how is that going for me? How's that working out? How do I feel about that? What impact is this having on me and my relationships? And am I okay with that? And then the planning, the P, is forward planning. Okay, what might I do differently? What do I need to think about? So these are all different ways of actually raising self-awareness, reflecting, evaluating, and then planning. And that's really helpful in thinking about how we can take our knowledge about basic needs, but not just know about it. How can we actually actively help us to improve the relationships we have in life and actually help us to improve how our basic needs are met?
Emotion coaching is a really effective tool and skill to use with young people, colleagues, parents, anyone you know really, when they are in a heightened state of emotion. It could be if they're really angry, they could be really anxious, they could be really upset, they could be overly happy, for example, overly excited, shall we say. And it's really a good skill to use to get them start thinking about maybe inappropriate behaviours that they're showing at the time and what things they can do differently in the future. It has 4 steps to it, and these are probably things that you're actually doing already and probably don't really realise that it's a skill that's formally known as anything. The first step is to be aware of your own feelings and observe the young person or whoever else it may be that you're working with, and to really connect with them. So this is about, one, just think about how you're feeling. Are you in an appropriate state of being to deal with this situation? And also look at the clues that the young person is showing you. What body language are they using? What is their tone of voice? What are their facial expressions? And it's where relationships really come into play as well. If you know this young person really well, you know what things they enjoy, you know what they respond to well, and how they behave when they're feeling a certain way, what their triggers are, etc. That's where this part can really, really be effective. When you've got a good relationship with that student, one, they trust you to a point where they'll let you connect with them, and also you know how to connect with them. Step 2, this is listen to the young person without judgment or criticism and help them to name their emotions and their feelings. So it's a really important step in terms of getting them to understand that all the feelings they have are validated, and for them to feel a certain way in a certain situation is absolutely fine. And it's important that they do understand that. And at which point, this is maybe a good opportunity for you also to maybe model to them that, you might feel the same way in a situation like this. Or maybe be curious about their feelings. You might sort of start saying to them, this is where you might start labeling their feelings of, oh, I wonder if you might be feeling quite frustrated at the moment. Help them, especially if they're a young person who doesn't have particularly good emotional literacy. This is a good stage for them to start learning about these things. A good word to use is wobbly, because this can relate to such a wide range of different emotions and states of emotional well-being. So if you don't necessarily want to influence what they're saying and how they're feeling, or if you don't really know how they're feeling, you can't really tell, you might just want to start off using the word wobbly, and then you can sort of expand from there. By labeling how they're feeling, this has a reaction in their brain which automatically will start to calm their brain straight away. So it's really effective in the process of trying to get them to calm down and really realise that people do understand and they are being listened to. So these two processes are really key in terms of calming them down and regulating them. Step 3 is about setting limits and boundaries. So even though we want them to be calm and we're understanding their feelings and we really want to show empathy towards them, and we want to show them that we care, we still need to set limits and boundaries. We still need to tell them if their behaviour that they're showing us isn't okay, because this ultimately is a situation where we want them to learn. We want them to learn what is appropriate in the future. So you may say to a student, for example, Johnny, I can see at the moment by, the body language you're showing me that you're probably really angry, and I know that what so-and-so has said to you would make you angry. That would make me really angry. But what's not okay is that you've just punched them. That's not acceptable behaviour. You could have really hurt him, and it's not okay. We don't accept that here. The last stage and the last step is about finding solutions and doing real problem solving around the situation of, what happened, just then what wasn't necessarily okay and what can you do next time, or what do you need right now to help you. But this stage is really important. This stage cannot be done until the young person is calm. Until they're calm, they just cannot access their thinking brain. If they're not calm yet, you run the risk of agitating them further, and also they're just not going to get the best response. They're not going to get their best answers, their best problem solving out of them. They just physically cannot access their thinking brain at that time. So this is something where it could be a really quick process. They could calm down really quickly and get all of these steps done straight, bomb, 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 one after the other. It could be a really long process where it's taken a really long time to calm down, and maybe you need to revisit step 4 at a stage after. You might need to revisit step 4 in an hour's time, in 2 hours' time, at the end of the day, maybe tomorrow morning. But it's really important that step 4 and step 3 are done. If you want to know a bit more about why they can't access step 4 yet, you can look at some of our later further webinars that will be coming out that will look a little bit more at the stress response, so keep your eye out for those. It can also, looking at emotion coaching, we can also do this in different orders. It doesn't necessarily have to be done strictly in this order, as long as step 4 does come last, because like we say, it has to be done once they've calmed down. But you will be able to judge that in the situation, because you'll generally know those young people, and you'll be able to get a sense of, what's appropriate for me to do right now. There is a little link at the bottom here. You can go to that to look at a little bit more on emotion coaching, some examples of practice, etc.
Here is a visual for the WER approach that was mentioned earlier on when we were talking about our 5 basic human needs and how that relates to behaviours that we see in school, and how no matter what we're doing, whether we realise it or not, the ways in which we're acting are driven by our needs that we should get met, and they're 5 basic needs: for survival, love and belonging, power, freedom and fun. And the WER is a really great thinking, problem solving tool to help children, young people and adults to reflect on what's going on. So the WER stands for what, doing, evaluate and plan. And these are the kinds of things, and actually this can be made into a prompt card where you have these key questions that key adults can have, or young people can have as prompt cards, to start them to think about this, going from a co-regulation strategy where adults do it alongside and prompt a young person to help them to reflect on whether or not this is something that's done as part of the young person being self-aware and developing their own self-regulation strategies of reflecting. And this has to be done not in the moment of dysregulation when a young person is, not able to think clearly. This process is something that happens more once the body has been regulated, and the young person is in more of a thinking place to be able to answer some of these questions and think. So we start off with the what. So the WER, we start off with, what is it that you want or need right now? When you're behaving like that just then, what is it that you think you wanted? What is it that you needed? And if we've taught the children, young people about their 5 needs, we might actually be explicit to say, do you think you were needing some power? Do you think some knowledge or some skills? Do you think you were needing to feel like you belonged, or some love or affection? Do you think like this was a survival need for you that you needed to get out of there? So trying to relate what it was that they were doing, their actions and behaviour, with what they think they might have needed at that time or have wanted at that time. And sometimes if you ask them what do they want or what do they need, and they answer you what did they want, you can say, okay, so I hear that you want this. I wonder what you might have needed that was driving you to want that. So the need sometimes can be layered down a little bit underneath what is it that they want. But asking them, what is it that you want or need? And then the doing part. So is what you were doing helping you get this? Was what you were doing moving you nearer to getting what it was that you needed? Or was it moving you further away from getting that need met? And what was the impact of doing that on you? And what do you think the impact of doing that was on other people around you? Did doing this behaviour have an impact on any of your relationships that you had? So you're exploring here the impact of the doing, and trying to say whether or not do you think this was getting them closer to their goals of what they needed or further away from them, which links in nicely with the evaluate, the E part. So how is this working out for you? How's it going? Do you feel okay? Is there anything that you could change about this? How do you want things to be? Does how you behaved and what you were doing, does that reflect your values in life? What's important to you? Does it reflect your hopes and your wishes? So you're trying to get them to evaluate whether or not they're okay with what's just gone on. You might reflect back to, so you said when you were doing this behaviour that it had this impact on you, or it had this impact on your relationships. So are you okay with that, or are you not okay with that? Are you happy for that to continue, or is that something you'd like to be different? So you're asking them there about contemplating change there. You're asking them to be thinking about what is it that I want or need here. And this is the evaluate part there is very key in actually thinking about motivational change and whether a young person or child is engaged in wanting things to be different. And actually sometimes they don't want things to be different, and you kind of have to sit with more exploring about the what is it they need and the impact of what they're doing. Explore that more before there's a shift. But if they want to think about doing things differently, then you start to plan. So how might you do things differently next time? And when the next time arrives that you need this thing again, or you want something to happen, do you want to do the same thing again, or should we try doing something different? What relationships and connections could help you with this? So who could you have to support you with this? Who would you like to remind you or to practice this with? Who would you like to have nearby that you can seek out if something happens and you're struggling? And once you've got a plan in place, who can you share this plan with? So think about their resources in relationships wise of people and places that they can seek to support them with this. And this is called the WE